I was publicly humiliated by my CEO. So I stole the company's secrets. Corporate revenge in a dimly lit conference room. Voices echoed like thunder, drowning out the storm outside. The air felt electric, buzzing with tension. Something wicked was about to unfold. Jane sat there, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest, panic tightening around her throat as her CEO, Mr. Lawson, glared at her from across the table. His eyes burned with fury as he unleashed a tirade of humiliation, tearing apart her hard work, her sweat, her very dedication. It was brutal. The way he spoke felt like daggers, slicing through her confidence and leaving her gasping for breath. But that wasn't the strangest part. In the corner of the room, a shadow moved, almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something out of place caught Jane's eye. A glint. A hidden camera? Who was watching? The thought sent shivers down her spine. A laugh erupted from another team member, a cruel sound that echoed in conjunction with Mr. Lawson's outburst. This twisted display felt like a horror movie, where victimization was the plot twist, and she was the unwitting star. Once the shouting ceased, Jane felt the heavy silence suffocating her. She glanced subtly around the room. Her colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes wide with shock, yet no one spoke up. It was like they were frozen, imprisoned by their own fear. That gasping silence, the weight of unspoken words, left Jane alone with her shame. And yet, deep down, a spark ignited. Could she turn this humiliation into something powerful? Something dark? As she left the room, adrenaline surged through her, drowning out the muffled whispers and sideways glances. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed in a manic rhythm. She could feel the heat of rage flushing her cheeks, an overwhelming urge to retaliate. Steal what? Secrets? Information? The very DNA of the company that twisted her pain into a weapon? The thrill of revenge danced tantalizingly on the edge of her thoughts. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With each step towards her desk, thoughts spiraled. She needed a plan. Her fingers danced over the keyboard as her mind raced. What could she access? Sensitive documents? Hidden files? Everyone else was oblivious, right? The clock ticked, time slipping away like sand through her fingers. She found herself plotting how to cloak her actions in a veil of normality while harboring the storm within. That thrill, that thought of snatching back control, sent a jolt of exhilaration through her veins. What if returning to the office tomorrow with a sense of power was the best comeback? Jane's heart raced like a runaway train. She could taste the triumph mingling with fear as she envisioned her revenge. But would it be enough? Could she really follow through with this daring act? Would it explode in her face, or would it be the beginning of something spectacular? The unanswered questions loomed over her, each one more tantalizing than the last, a siren's call in the deafening silence. Jane's thoughts swirled as she arrived at her desk, casting furtive glances around the bustling office. Colleagues shuffled past, their chatter a distant hum in her ears. No one had dared to approach her after the meeting, and that silence felt like an invitation. She was not just an employee, she was a vessel ready to unleash chaos. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Could she really do it? The question gnawed at her. Every file, every hidden document could be a lifeline, a chance to expose the rot festering beneath the polished surface of the company. She swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. Her heart raced with reckless determination. Jane had always been good at playing the game, mastering the politics, the nuances of corporate life. But this was different. This was about survival. She had her day-to-day role to maintain, the facade of normalcy to uphold. Mr. Lawson was a viper, but she could be cunning. The clock ticked, and she could feel the moments slipping away. She needed to find a way into the secure files, the company's secrets that could both ruin lives and change hers forever. How? The mainframe. She had access, a small window of opportunity in the late hours when security was lax. Images flashed through her mind, of being free from the tyranny of Mr. Lawson, of revenge served cold like the steel of a blade. She glanced back at the conference room door. Would someone tell him what she was up to? In a daring move, she sent an email to herself, embedding a simple code key to access the files she would need later. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. She leaned back in her chair, inhaling deeply to steady herself, to quiet the whirlwind inside. Time to strategize. Every minute spent plotting was one less they'd look for her. She smoothed her skirt, the fabric cool against her skin, a small comfort amid the storm brewing in her mind. Jane pulled up a calendar on her screen. The office party in 3 days would give her the perfect cover. She could slip away unnoticed in the chaos and give herself a fighting chance. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, jolting her back to reality. It was a message from her colleague Mike. "Are you okay?" Heard what happened with Mr. Lawson. A pang of guilt shot through her. Did she want sympathy? It felt weak. Yet the response echoed, cutting through the doubts. "I'm fine. Just focusing on work." Sinking back into her chair, Jane narrowed her eyes at the blinking cursor on the screen. She was done feeling weak. Instead, she'd pivot that sympathy into her plans. What if Mike knew something? Altered files? Whispers about Mr. Lawson's shady conduct? It'd be just the twist she needed to pull off this heist, but first, she had to tread carefully, a cat among the unsuspecting pigeons in the office. The dread of being discovered loomed over her like a shadowy figure. She hoped the whispers of fear would drown out her embers of ambition. As her finger hovered once more over the keyboard, the excitement of revenge hashed against the danger of getting caught. What would her next move be? Little did she know, there were eyes watching, waiting for the perfect moment to slip the knife in deeper. Would she spiral into despair or rise to seize the moment? The game was on. The office thrummed with life, but Jane felt like a ghost floating through the chaos. Every laugh, every shared secret pierced her like ice. Mike's message was a thin thread that tied her to reality, but she was already fraying at the edges. The clock continuously ticked, and the hours felt warped, stretching her patience to its breaking point. The shadows stretched longer as evening approached. Employees began trickling out, hastening their exits, always in a hurry to leave behind the workday. However, Jane lingered, determined to meld with the fading throngs. Each one slipping away added to her resolve, fueling her desperation for the truth locked away in the digital vault. She glanced at her screen. It shimmered with blips of notifications, a mocking reminder of the world she felt alien to now. Time to act. With a quick scurry, she walked toward the break room. A group of couples chatted, laughter rising like waves. She smiled, attempting to mask the turmoil inside, but nobody seemed to notice the facade. The coffee machine rattled, filling the room with bitter hints of adrenaline. "Hey, Jane. You want some?" One of them called. She hesitated, sensing the moment slip away. "Nah, I'm good," she replied with a casual wave, steering her feet outside the chaos and toward the small cubicle maze leading to the IT area, tension coiled tightly in her stomach. The hallway was dim, shadows draping along the walls like secrets waiting to be unveiled. She approached the door to the server room, a heavy steel fortress that loomed over her hopes. Was this really happening? Could she outsmart a system designed to keep her out? She quickly glanced around, and her heart raced as she pressed her palm against the scanner. Beep. The door clicked open. The air inside the server room caused her spine to tingle. Rows of devices blinked rhythmically, humming like an ominous heartbeat. This was it. This place held the life source of the company, the heart of the monster she aimed to slay. But before she could dive into the mainframe, a noise echoed in the hallway, a rapid shuffle followed by whispers. Panic surged as she ducked behind a server rack. The voices grew closer, and Jane fought to steady her breathing, keeping her heart from hammering. "I swear it was her," a voice hissed. She came out of Lawson's office looking like she'd seen a ghost. "We need to keep an eye on her." "A rat among us," said another voice, laced with distrust. Jane could almost feel their eyes scanning the room, searching for her. What if they knew? What if they were already onto her plan? She held her breath, pressing against the cold metal, praying the darkness would swallow her whole. The whispers faded, and she waited a heartbeat longer until she couldn't hear a thing. Finally, Jane exhaled. Adrenaline surged through her, pushing her to dart out from her hiding spot. No time to waste. She settled in front of the computer, praying for the speed of 1,000 cheetahs racing her thoughts as she punched in her code. A sleek interface lit up before her. Rows of data streamed past, names, numbers, and files. She had to find something specific, something explosive. Her fingers danced over the keyboard, hunting for corruption, for deceit, for anything that could topple Mr. Lawson's empire. Just then, a terrifying realization hit. The conventional security system was just the surface. There were backdoors, traps, danger lurking everywhere. Would the data she uncovered scroll smoothly to redemption or crumble beneath the weight of conspiracy? Suddenly, lights flashed as alarms began screeching, slicing through the thick tension. Her heart dropped. Shivers enveloped her. She was no longer just stealing secrets. Now she was a fugitive running from the law, her spirit trembling as she threaded between knowing the stakes. Would she unravel the truth or become the very casualty she sought to escape? Her eyes widened, desperately scanning for an escape. Would she outsmart them before the clock ran out? The blaring alarms filled the room, a jarring soundtrack to her unraveling plan. Panic surged in Jane's chest like wildfire, each second counting down like a prison sentence. She had to move. Fast. Chaotic thoughts spun through her mind: get the files, find the truth, escape. But the sharp, pervasive anxiety wrapped around her throat, squeezing tighter with every pulse of crimson light. Without thinking, she clicked through file folders, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Names scrolled past, invoices, exchanges, and emails. But her eyes burned with urgency for that one file, the golden ticket. Lawson's scheme had to be buried in here somewhere. Come on, she whispered, praying to no one in particular. Her heart raced not just from fear, but from the electric thrill of unlocking secrets that could shatter lives. Suddenly, the screen flickered and the system jolted. It was a glitch or a trap. Her stomach twisted. No, not now. She pounded the keys, fingers sticky with sweat. She had to break through. A dark plan was swirling, and she was right in the eye of the storm. The door burst open. Shadows filled the entrance, silhouettes of security guards imposing and fierce. They were there for her. Her gut churned. She was cornered. Step away from the computer, barked the lead guard, his voice a guttural growl. Jane's instinct kicked in. She snatched her phone from her pocket, praying against hope that she hadn't lost the intel Mike sent her, the breadcrumb trail she desperately needed. She barely glanced at the guards, already plotting her next move. With a deep breath, she swung around, counting on instinct and adrenaline. She was done being a victim. These weren't just corporate enemies, they were threats to her future. The future she declawed for, only to have it ripped away by that jerk of a CEO. Rushing toward a nearby door that led to the back stairwell, she flung it open and darted through just as she heard the guard shout. She could sense their pursuit, the thudding footsteps echoing behind her, a haunting reminder of how close they were. Slipping through the narrow stairwell, she pressed up the steps 2 at a time. Her legs burned, but she pushed on, ignoring the fire in her muscles. Each turn was a gamble, an opportunity for escape or capture. Flashes of light from the security cameras caught her attention as she ducked beneath them, her heart pounding incessantly. So many eyes in the dark, lurking, waiting to expose her. Emerging onto the rooftop, she paused. The cool air hit her like a wave, grounding her for just a moment. Taking a second to breathe, she contemplated her next steps. The ground below felt like a world away. She could see the chaos, the cars scurrying, unaware of the storm brewing above them, but she couldn't just run. She needed her evidence, her leverage. With a shaking hand, she brought out her phone, hoping the signal would breach the oppressive electronics of the building. She quickly scrolled through Mike's texts, searching for his last message, the file he'd sent. Her heart raced as an idea sparked. "Just hold on, Mike," she muttered, adrenaline igniting a fire in her veins. She needed to get back to her desk, retrieve the physical copies, more substantial than digital evidence. The stakes had just intensified, but that was only if she could outwit the guards now racing upstairs. A reckless thought whispered in her mind. If she could find a way down unseen, maybe, just maybe, she could escape before the dust settled. Standing at the edge of the rooftop, a drop into the alley below looked less daunting than the hands of the guards reaching for her. She turned to scan for another way down, mind wheeling, heart slamming in her chest. Would she plunge into the depths or face capture? The city lay sprawling beneath her, oblivious. Jane took a deep breath, then leapt into the unknown. The wind whipped around Jane as she fell, adrenaline elevating her heartbeat. Gravity tugged at her relentlessly, and a moment of sheer panic seized her. Would she hit hard or find a way to roll out of the impact? But the world blurred, and the ground rushed up to meet her. She landed awkwardly, hitting the dumpster's edge before tumbling to the ground. Pain shot through her shoulder, but her body shouted at her to move. Scrambling to her feet, she staggered into the alley, heart hammering, breath coming fast and shallow. The damning alarms echoed faintly above her, a dark siren warning of impending doom. She paused, leaning against the cool bricks, needing to catch her breath. That was too close. She could still hear the guards yelling. She needed to get lost in this urban maze before they caught up. Every moment counted. Quickly, she ducked behind a stack of delivery crates, checking her phone for messages. Please, let there be something. A vague hope swept through her. If anyone could help her now, it was Mike. Yet, her screen glared back at her with an unmet expectation. Just the promise of a sliver of hope. Her brain raced, focusing on survival. She couldn't think about the pain in her shoulder. She had to get back inside, retrieve the physical copies, and get to safety with the truth. Seeing a few streets ahead with people rushing past, she slipped silently out of the alley. Blending in with the crowd was her best chance. She made her way through the throng, keeping her head down, until her gaze locked onto a street vendor with an open cart of cold drinks. Just a distraction, a momentary loss of focus, but it gave her an idea. "Excuse me, can I get a soda?" she gasped, feigning panting fatigue. As the vendor turned, she grabbed a can, paid with cash she hardly remembered having, and melted into the crowd just as voices drifted closer. Did anyone see her? She must be close. The urgency was palpable, a cruel reminder of how much power they wielded. The guard's determination sent a chill down her spine. Briskly maneuvering through the streets, Jane's mind was in overdrive. The offices were only a few blocks away. She could slip back inside, pilfer the files, and sneak out undetected. If she was quick enough, every corner turned felt laden with uncertainty. She cut through an alley and emerged on the other side, just shy of her target. The building loomed ahead. It felt like a fortress now, fortified against her desperate will. Each heavy step tightened her chest. Nudging the door open, she slipped inside, heart still racing. The foyer was dark, the hum of the overhead lights an eerie reminder that she was venturing deeper into enemy territory. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, making her blood run cold. But it wasn't just her heartbeat. She heard voices murmured nearby. "Who's on the lookout?" one guard asked, his tone laced with frustration. "She's got to show up somewhere." She froze. They were already scouring the building. Their superior knowledge of the grounds would be a disadvantage she couldn't afford. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back. But as her eyes darted, she noticed a service elevator at the end of the hall. If she could reach it unseen, it might take her to the upper floors, closer to her desk, her safety. Taking a cautious breath, she faded into the shadows. Each step was calculated, each breath measured. She moved like a phantom, blending in with the architecture and avoiding contact with the lights. But just as she reached for the elevator's call button, a low grumble resonated behind her. The guards entered the lobby, their shadows stretching ominously in her direction. Panic surged again. She darted for the doors, but there wouldn't be enough time. They had her scent. Desperation clawed at her throat. Just as the elevator chimed, The ding of the security alarm echoed loudly in the pit of her stomach. She felt the oppressive weight of anxiety closing in. What would she do? The doors started to slide open, offering a glimpse of possible escape. Would she gamble on the elevator or confront the guards? The tension hung heavy in the air, and time stretched painfully thin. Jane's pulse thundered in her ears as the choice loomed before her. The doors of the elevator opened with a metallic sigh, inviting her into its dark space. Jane hesitated, glancing back at the guards converging on her previous location. The decision weighed heavily on her chest. She could either risk slipping inside the elevator, sealed behind its doors and still vulnerable to being trapped in an enclosed space, or face the guards and fight her way back. With a sharp intake of breath, she dove inside, pressing the button for the top floor. The doors slid shut with an ominous thud, creating a brief bubble of safety. Heart pounding, she focused on the ascending numbers, willing the machine to move faster, but each digit seemed to mock her patience. As the elevator glided smoothly upward, Jane's mind raced. Her shoulder throbbed painfully, yet her adrenaline blurred the edges of her pain into a dull ache. She could picture the files still locked away in her desk, the truth just waiting to be unveiled. If she could reach them, maybe she could turn the tide against those who wanted to keep her silent. The elevator came to a jolting stop, and the momentary jolt pulled her back to reality. A dreaded beep echoed, then the doors opened. The hallway was mercifully empty, but danger was still close. She slipped out quickly, her muscles taut with the lingering fear of being caught. Quickly, she made her way to her office, her mind a frantic jumble of thoughts. Trust in Mike had been misplaced, and the very people she had once considered allies now felt like shadows lurking in the corners of her mind. With every step, she reminded herself, find the truth. Everything hinged on it. She fumbled with the keys at her desk, the tremors in her hands threatening to betray her. Finally, the drawer flew open, and her files stared back at her like a pair of sentinels guarding the secrets she had worked so hard to uncover. Just as she lifted the stack, the sound of a door slamming echoed down the hallway. Alarm bells blared in her head. She wasn't out of the woods yet. The guards were still combing the building. Every instinct told her to run, but the files in her grasp felt like the weight of 1,000 sledgehammers, anchoring her to the spot. "Where are you?" She heard one of them bark, his voice carrying authority and menace in equal measure. Panic settled heavily in her throat. If they found her now, all would be lost. She shoved the files into her bag, heart racing at the thought of them getting away with everything: her career, her reputation, her very existence folded into those sheets of paper. "Think, Jane, think," she muttered under her breath. Her legs propelled her into action, but she needed a way out. The fire escape. It wasn't too far from her office. If she could reach it, she could finally break free. In a sprint, she darted toward the exit, hoping the lower floors hadn't been compromised. With each step, she could hear the echoes of footsteps growing louder. The guards were closer now. But through her growing dread, she spotted the door leading to the fire escape. Just a few feet away, suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a guard, blocking her only means of escape. Panic clawed at her chest as she skidded to a halt, searching for another route, another chance. "Stop right there," he shouted, raising a flashlight that pierced through the dim hallway like a spotlight on a stage. With no other options left, Jane sprinted back toward her office, her heart pounding violently against her ribs. The walls began to close in. Time was slipping through her fingers like sand. Just when she thought all hope was lost, she heard a voice from behind yelling for backup. A moment of confusion settled over the guard, giving her just enough time to slip into the nearest room, her breath coming in quick, desperate gasps. What now? As Jane pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing, she could hear the faint sound of footsteps approaching the office door. But in her gut, a shocking realization hit her harder than any blow. Someone had betrayed her. Someone was feeding them information. Her chest tightened as dread washed over her. Who was it? The moment hovered like a dark cloud, ready to rain down chaos. Would she find out who was truly working against her, Or would she be discovered before she could unveil the secrets she so desperately needed? The door clicked slowly. With time running out, she squinted at the growing shadows, readying herself for whatever came next. The door creaked open, and Jane's breath hitched. Heart racing, she stood frozen in the dim light of the room. She pushed herself further into the corner, her back pressed hard against the cool wall. The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing like drum beats inside her chest. Adrenaline surged, but all she could think was how to make it out alive. A guard stepped inside, scanning the room with a hawk-like focus. The beam from his flashlight illuminated the desk, the chair, the shadows, everything but Jane, who was nearly invisible against the dull gray surface. The guard's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, she felt like prey under his intense gaze. "Come on, where are you?" he muttered, irritation coloring his voice. His hair glinted under the harsh light, and Jane's mind raced. She needed to do something, anything. If he found her. Then, she recalled the janitor's closet across the narrow hallway. If she could make it there without being spotted, maybe she could hide just long enough for the guards to move on. The thought inspired a reckless sense of courage. The guard turned, moving toward the office doorway again, clearly unimpressed by the silence. This was her moment. Quiet as a whisper, she slipped out past him, holding her breath until she reached the edge of the doorway. But just as she was about to dart towards the hallway, he spun back around. "Hey!" he barked, his voice laced with fury. Pure instinct took over. Jane's legs propelled her forward, and she sprinted down the hall, the sound of her pounding heart drowning out everything else. The guard's heavy footsteps followed clumsily behind her, but she was gaining ground, adrenaline fueling her escape until she skid to a halt at the janitor's closet. With desperate urgency, Jane yanked the door open and squeezed inside, shutting it behind her in one hurried motion. Her chest heaved as she pressed her back against the door, squeezing her eyes shut. She could hear him in the distance, yelling into his radio, calling for backup. Panic coursed through her. The backup meant more eyes looking for her. She focused on her breathing, desperate to quell the rising tide of fear. Suddenly, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, the sound sharp against the silence of the cramped space. She gasped, cursing her own carelessness. This wasn't the time. With trembling fingers, she fished it out, hoping against hope that it was Mike or perhaps an ally who hadn't turned on her. The screen lit up, revealing a text message from an unknown number. "They're coming for you. Trust no one." Her heart sank. The betrayer was closer than she thought. A swell of nausea crept into her stomach. Who could it be? Questions swirled, suspicion and paranoia gnawed at her. Hastily, she shot a glance at the closet door, straining to listen for the guards. Time ticked by painfully slow. The thuds from the guard echoed in her mind, drawing nearer with each second. She couldn't just sit and wait. She needed to be proactive. As quietly as she could, she pulled open the closet's small window, hoping it led to a fire escape. The last thing she wanted was to be trapped in an enclosed space. She climbed up, her hands and knees scraping against the rough edges. Just as she hoisted herself through the opening, she heard voices, many voices growing closer, shouting her name. "Jane, where are you?" The panic rose within her, and she was slid half out of the window when she suddenly spotted a figure standing in the shadows beneath her, freezing her in place. Jane, a familiar voice called out, low and calm, yet laced with something she couldn't quite place. "Mike?" she whispered, disbelief and hope colliding in her chest. But just as she felt a flicker of relief, a realization crashed over her. Was he friend or foe? With nowhere to run, her heart racing, she was left with 3 seconds to decide whether to trust him or leap back into the chaos below. What would she choose? Jane's heart banged in her chest like a frantic drum, each beat synchronized with the panic that coursed through her veins. She was suspended between the chaos behind her and the uncertainty below. Mike's voice, so familiar yet jarring, hung heavy in the air. Had he orchestrated this? A fateful twist that felt all too real. "Get down from there," he urged, still steady but with an edge of desperation. "We need to hurry." The urgency in his tone tethered her back to reality. If she didn't act fast, the guards would swarm the hallway. Staring down into the shadows, she could see Mike's features sharpen against the light as he looked up at her, the determination in his gaze both familiar and unsettling. "Trust me, Jane. I'll get you out," he insisted, his voice rising slightly with urgency. But could she? The trust they'd forged in countless late-night discussions felt fragile now, teetering on a knife's edge. Every shared coffee, every failed office joke reverberated in her mind. Was this just a ruse? She hesitated, remembering the message that had shaken her inside that closet. Who else knew? She thought frantically. What if he is playing me? Please. He interrupted her spiraling thoughts, his eyes glistening with an urgency that felt genuine. I'm not a threat. Let us go. With a shaky exhale, she made her decision. Leaning out further, she grasped for Mike's extended arm. He caught her firmly, his grip both reassuring and strong. She swung her other leg over, preparing to drop to his side. But in that moment, a thunderous voice rang out, "Release your weapon." A chill shot through Jane, and suddenly, her reality sharpened. The guard was closer than she thought. Panic seized her as Mike looked toward the sound, his eyes widening with horror. "Go. Now!" he shouted, shoving her down. She hit the ground hard but rolled, scrambling to find her footing. Mike reacted swiftly, darting behind a nearby dumpster just as the guard came barreling around the corner. Gun raised, he blasted a warning shot, the bullet ricocheting off the concrete wall inches from Jane's head. "Get down!" Mike shouted, tugging her behind the dumpster. The smell was overpowering, and dread seeped into her bones. She had enough horror stories from offices, but this was live and real, and no boardroom backstab could compare. "Why are they after you?" Mike pressed, urgency steeping in each syllable. "They're close. We need to move." "I don't know." As she struggled to find the right words, fear grabbing hold of her throat. "It was a setup. Someone tipped them off about my plan." Mike's expression shifted from concern to a steely determination. "We have to get out of here. But if someone is playing both sides, we're in deep trouble." "I saw a way out," she said, desperation spurting out in fragmented words, "through the alley back there. We can lose them in the streets. Follow my lead, and whatever you do, don't look back." Drawing in a determined breath, she nodded. They scrambled from behind the dumpster, hearts racing, feet pounding against the pavement. The city loomed before them, an expanse of refuge and uncertainty. Hushed whispers of alleyways became their soundtracks as they darted into the gloom, shadows their only allies. But as they turned the corner, Mike froze. What now? There, blocking their escape, stood 3 guards, weapons ready, eyes scanning. "You want to get away this time, Jane?" One of them barked. Panic surged again, but Jane felt something else, a flicker of fury igniting deep within her. They thought they had her cornered, but she was ready. "Now!" she cried, breaking into a dash toward a narrow doorway just ahead. Mike followed without hesitation, but would they escape again? As they burst through, Jane was left with one thought. What if the ones saving her were actually the ones she had to fear? And as the door slammed shut behind them, she heard a voice whisper in the dark, "Trust me," but the real question lingered, could she? Jane and Mike stumbled into a dimly lit room. The heavy door shut with a definitive thud, cutting off the echoes of chaos outside. Instantly, the murmur of the street dissipated, replaced by a haunting silence that wrapped around them like a shroud. "Where are we?" Jane whispered, her breath heavy as she tried to adjust to the darkness. Everything felt urgent, and yet here they stood, ensconced in an unsettling calm. "Just a storage room," Mike said, scanning the corners. His voice strained under the weight of their situation. "We need to regroup." Heart racing, Jane pressed herself against a wall, the cool concrete grounding her even as panic churned inside. The room smelled musty, like secrets long forgotten. She closed her eyes, fighting the nausea swirling within her. The guard's voice still echoed in her ears. "You want to get away this time. Do you think they're searching for us?" she asked, glancing at Mike, who was busy shifting aside a stack of boxes. "Definitely," he replied, brushing dust from a stack labeled admin supplies. But they want to know where we've gone yet. The dim light illuminated the panic etched on his face, the furrowed brow and clenched fists betraying his composed exterior. We need to find a way out of here before they realize we're hiding. Jane felt a flicker of resentment rise within her. Why did she have to be here? Why couldn't she just live her quiet life behind a desk? This was never supposed to happen, she muttered, but Mike shook his head, determination gleaming in his eyes. You're strong, Jane. You took the first step by trusting me. We'll figure this out together. She nodded, the swirl of doubt still simmering beneath the surface. As they rifled through boxes, a discovery caught Jane's attention. A hole torn in the wall, just wide enough for someone to squeeze through. Light spilled from the other side, illuminating the clutter. Mike, look. She pointed, hope momentarily flickering to life. He squinted at the opening. Where does it lead? I don't know, but it might lead us out. With a quick glance back to ensure they'd not been followed, he motioned for her to go first. You want to take the lead? Show me that fury you were feeling earlier. Encouraged, Jane crawled toward the hole, feeling the cool air brush against her face as she squeezed through. The space was tight, but adrenaline propelled her forward into the unknown. She emerged into another narrow alleyway, the night air filling her lungs with a rush of fresh possibility. Mike followed closely, but as he entered, a loud noise reverberated behind them. Did you hear that? He asked, eyes wide. Yes, before she could finish her thought, shadows cast by rushing figures emerged around the corner. There they are. Get them. Time seemed to freeze, adrenaline slamming through her veins. In a split second, every instinct screamed at her to run. Without another word, she bolted, Mike at her heels, both panicking at the realization they were still trapped despite their escape. They raced through the alley, panting, the pounding of their feet outmatched only by the thumping of their hearts. But then, everything shifted. Smoke began to waft through the air, trailing from a series of unexplained flickering lights ahead. What is happening? Jane gasped, coughing. I don't know, but we can't stop. Mike shouted, eyes darting around as they plunged further into what felt like a maelstrom. They reached a dead end, a brick wall looming before them. Jane's heart sank. We're trapped. Not yet. Mike shouted, turning abruptly to face the encroaching shadows, fists raised. We fight. Jane's heart sank further, a wave of dread slamming against her resolve. As their pursuers closed in, the shadows transformed into distinct figures, weapons glinting in the streetlight's glow. But in the fleeting moment of clarity, she realized a voice from the past echoed in her mind, and it froze her in place. Do you understand what trust really means? Now or never, Jane. Mike barked, breaking her trance, and as the figures advanced, uncertainty gnawed at her. Were they destined to be cornered? Like rats, or would they finally claim their agency in this chaotic game of betrayal and survival? And then it hit her, the urgency hadn't dimmed yet. A thought sparked in her mind. What if this was all part of something bigger? But this time, she wouldn't be the one to surrender. Let us go, she shouted, adrenaline overtaking fear as she spun to face the wall. Mike looked at her, confusion flickering across his face, but before he could respond, she shouted, we climb. As panic coursed through her, Jane felt a chilling certainty they were racing against time, secrets spiraling around them like smoke. But could she trust Mike at this moment of reckoning? What if the real danger was closer than she thought? Jane's body trembled with a mix of adrenaline and fear. As she pressed against the brick wall, she felt the rough texture beneath her palms. The shadows were closing in, and time was not on her side. This was her moment of reckoning, a moment when she had to decide whether to trust Mike completely or keep him at arm's length. Climb? Are you serious? Mike exclaimed, his breath coming in short bursts. There's no way out up there. Trust me. We can't wait for them to close in on us, she insisted, glancing over her shoulder at the approaching figures. Panic flickered behind her eyes, but determination flickered even brighter. We have to. With a quick nod and a shared glance, they turned towards the wall. Jane jumped, her fingers finding a ledge just above her reach. She strained to pull herself up, using every ounce of strength she had. Mike was right behind her, climbing with equal urgency. As they scrambled higher, desperation surged through her. With every inch they gained, the world below faded a little more, the chaos, the threats, the fear. Suddenly, a voice roared from below, cutting through the rush. There they are. Up on the wall. Call for backup. The order sent a chill down Jane's spine. We have to move faster, she urged as they scrambled up the rough bricks, the sounds of pursuit ringing like death knells in their ears. Just as they reached the top, Jane spotted a narrow ledge extending across the roof, a sliver of hope glimmering in the darkness. We can jump to the other side. We're not going to land safely, Mike shouted, hands shaking with fear and exertion. We'll break something. Or we'll get caught, Jane countered, leaning into the fear that surged through her. We have no choice. Taking a breath, she leapt, propelled by sheer will. She landed hard but rolled, absorbing the impact. Holy crap! Mike gasped behind her, mirroring her leap just in time. They both stumbled to their feet, hearts racing, adrenaline pulsing through them as they took in their surroundings. The rooftop extended into a maze of chimneys and vents, but the thrill of freedom washed over her, if only momentarily. We need to find a way down, Jane said, scanning for an escape route. Over there. Mike pointed toward a fire escape at the far end. They sped toward it, but faint voices echoed from below, sending panic crashing back. Where are they? One of the guards shouted. There was no time to waste. Go, go, go! Jane yelled, reaching the fire escape first. She flew down the metal rungs, the sharp clang of footsteps behind them growing louder. Once on the ground, they dashed into the nearest alley, panting like freight trains. Darkness enveloped them, an ally that cloaked their escape. Where do we go now? Mike asked, breathless but now focused. We have to get the evidence I collected. It's in my bag back at the office. We can't risk them finding out about our escape and my involvement. Are you absolutely out of your mind? They'll be watching the building like hawks. Exactly, Jane said, her voice low but filled with steely resolve. If I can get the papers, we can expose the truth. Mike hesitated. What if they've already found out? What if you're being watched? I have to know, she replied, the urgency tightening her chest. Every part of this, the pain, the betrayal, it can't go unanswered. They crouched in the alley, adrenaline making their thoughts race. In that moment of quiet, Jane glimpsed the flicker of a plan in motion. I know a way to slip back in. We need a distraction. Mike raised an eyebrow. A distraction? What are you thinking? Something chaotic. Something to draw their eyes away from the building. The thoughts whirled in her mind, a flicker of inspiration igniting within. They could turn the tables. Let us set off a fire alarm in the lobby. Everyone will run out to the street, panicking, and it may give us the cover we need. Mike's eyes widened. That's wild. What if it backfires and you're caught? It's a risk I'm willing to take. This ends today, Mike. For everyone who got pushed around. With a nod of determination, they circled back toward the entrance. The city moved around them, the noise of life thundering, but their mission surged with urgency. They slipped from the shadows into the bustling streets, blending in like ghosts. As they approached, Jane's heart raced, not out of fear, but with a righteous fire within her. Just follow my lead and trust me. She was going to reclaim her life. Once they reached the building, Mike stood sentinel while Jane slipped inside, the air heavy with tension. The alarms blared above, but she pressed forward. Glancing across the lobby, she noticed a row of people gathering, confusion at the forefront, fear motoring the murmur. No, she whispered urgently to Mike, her pulse pounding in sync with her thoughts. Jane dashed toward the nearest break room, where the alarm panel blinked ominously. She yanked the panel open, fingers trembling with anticipation. Come on, she pleaded with herself as she scrambled through the wires, igniting a spark of frenzied tinkering. She had just wired the panel when the door swung behind her. A security guard stormed in, anger etched on his face. Hey, he shouted, but before he could reach for her, she yanked away and surged toward the exit, shouting, It's malfunctioning. We need to get everyone out. A fire of urgency fueled her words. The guard blinked, confusion coursing through his expression. That split second of uncertainty, that was her chance. "Everyone out. Move," she yelled, darting back through the crowd. The chaos swelled like waves, and people began to rush. "Mike," she shouted, hoping he was there, hoping he was following their plan. And there he was, darting towards her through the crowd, eyes alight with determination. "Let us go," he urged, grabbing her hand with fierce urgency. They rushed towards the stairwell, each step filled with a thrill of chaos that only fueled them further. Racing through the stairwell, they emerged onto the floor, a string of offices lined with doors that felt like the entrances to freedom. "Which way?" Mike shouted as alarms blared louder above them, warning of imminent exposure. "To my desk. We can collect everything I need." As they barreled towards her office, Jane's heart thundered wildly. Whoever had turned against her would get the shock of their lives. Reaching her desk, she rifled through the drawer, hands shaking with anticipation as she pulled the files, all the evidence of corruption, all the truths. "Got it," she cried, stuffing the papers into her bag just as footsteps thundered down the hallway toward them. "Let us go," Mike urged, their every second laced with the drum of urgency as they turned into a back exit, sprinting toward freedom. "Jane, over here," Mike called as they tore out through the back entrance, the cool evening air hitting them. They dove into an alley, breathless and alive, and it struck her like an epiphany. This was not the end, but a bold beginning. A chance to rip the mask off deceit and to fight back an ally forged in the fire of a shared struggle. But could they truly outrun the lies? Jane's thoughts tumbled in her head, but also now, with clarity. "You still have my back, right?" she asked Mike in a whisper. "Always," he said, eyes bright with determination. Together, they stepped into the uncertain night, ready to shatter the darkness that had bound them and to reclaim their truth. And with that, they burst into the world bound by betrayal, but empowered by the promise of justice. Jane knew this fight would not be easy. The shadows lingered, but together they were unstoppable. If they could dismantle the web of deceit, nothing could stop them. And that was the essence of a true comeback, of fire that wouldn't be extinguished. In the heart of the city, they started to forge a new path, finally ready to reclaim the lives they had been denied for too long. Together, they would rise. Don't miss this incredible journey. You need to subscribe now so you can join Jane and Mike as they take on the fight of their lives. Mark your calendars, because you won't want to miss the next chapter. Smash that like button now to help us keep bringing these thrilling stories to life. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about their next moves. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see the power of rising up in the face of adversity. Your support makes a difference in bringing these stories to the forefront.